I would have to say what's changed the most has been flexibility. Just because costs are rising in healthcare, but like the support for it has never really kept pace. Right, we see that there's almost like a shrinkage, right, in the opportunity that these CEs have the opportunity to provide savings to expand their services in their communities, and you add on manufacturer restrictions, data requirements, new platforms. It used to be you could reach up to your leadership and say, hey, X, Y, and Z is going on. Now it's just like A, B, C, D plus X, Y, and Z.
Eric, let's address the elephant in the room, right? MFP. That's the biggest talking point in this space. As MFP, Medicare maximum fair price, becomes an operational reality, what are covered entities still underestimating, in your opinion?
What separates a team that is simply reacting to these changes or problems, ones that is actually building a capability to find the opportunity and build a long-term solution or pipeline on that?
I would probably start with risk, right? Risk is always like the first thing you got to think about what's irreversible, right? What can I not come back from? And then you got to make sure you protect those areas first.
Welcome to 340B Pulse, a North Arc podcast by Prioritization. I am Muhammad Atif, your host, CTO, and founder at Prioritization and North Arc. For nearly 2 decades, we have been building healthcare systems, data platform, and compliance-heavy environments where precision really matters. Over the time, that work pulled us deeper into the real operational side of 340B, claims validation, reporting gaps, manufacturer requirements like ASP and Beacon, and ultimately program defensibility. And that's exactly why this podcast exists. 340B Pulse is about operator-level conversations, not noise, not politics, but how this program actually works on day-to-day basis. I'm joined today by my co-host, Hassan, who leads program consultancy for digital transformation initiative across 340B workflows.
Thanks, Atif. Excited to be here. Looking forward to unpacking where real friction shows up inside 340B workflows, especially at the operational layer.
Thank you, Hassan. And today we are focusing on covered entities how covered entities are navigating MFP, rebate, and next operational load. So covered entities are being asked to do more with the same teams, manage rising complexity, absorb MFP and rebate responsibilities, and figure out where technology actually helps versus just adding the noise. What's interesting is the pressure is no longer just about compliance or saving, it's about capacity, workflow ownership, execution, and MFP is no longer theoretical, it's becoming operational, and at the same time, rebate complexity is pushing more responsibility downstream. So this conversation is really about that gap, what's changing, how it is landing on the teams, and what actually takes to manage it effectively.
With that, let me introduce our guest for today, Eric Mitchell. Eric Mitchell is a healthcare leader with over 14 years of experience across the pharmaceutical and medical surgical space, holding a bachelor's degree in pharmaceutical business and a master's degree in organizational leadership. His work spans pharmacy finance, 340B strategy, procurement and supply chain, giving him a unique perspective on how strategy translates into day-to-day execution. Eric is known for working collaboratively across teams and broader healthcare ecosystems, building strong relationships, aligning stakeholders, and bringing people together to solve complex challenges and driving meaningful outcomes. He's led teams, built strategic partnerships, and driven improvement through process optimization and thoughtful technology adoption. All of it grounded in a strong foundation in organizational leadership. Eric, a very warm welcome to 340B Pulse. Great to have you with us.
It's wonderful to be here today. Looking forward to joining in on the discussion and all the fun stuff that's going on in the industry. So,
thank you, Eric. So, Eric, before we deep dive into this topic, can you share us a bit about your journey?
Yeah. Happily. It doesn't seem like it's that long, but then when you start to recite it back in your head, it's like, wow, it's a lot longer than what I thought it was. But I started out, as mentioned, pharmaceutical business degree, and I actually got started in my own hometown's hospital in an internship to do pharmacy business, and there is where I've got introduced to just pharmacy management, inventory, and then 340B, right? The fun topic of the hour, right? And from there, it kind of expanded because I got to go through my first HRSA audit during the internship, and then it expanded into more of a coordinator role. And so from there, I took some of my talents through just some moves and things in the job market, was able to get to North Carolina and work for a couple health systems down there doing the same thing, but in a larger capacity across health systems. And I just really started to get entrenched in the program, working with some consultant groups and understanding more about the bigger impact that 340B has on the community, right? And so I think that's what kind of led me into just sticking with it. And then from there, I got a chance to come back home from Ohio, from North Carolina, and I actually worked at Ohio State University. And that was like one of the best experiences that I've had to build the program from the ground up through Academia Medical Center. And ultimately, like, I could have stayed like on that trajectory and saw where things would have took me, but sometimes life shifts some things around, and I had some great mentors who were like, hey, in order for you to kind of get a full encompassing view of the industry, you need to like go to the wholesaler side of the business, right? Take a step, like kind of figure out yourself, learn a little bit more, and put some more tools in your tool belt. And so ultimately, I ended up getting into a job in McKesson, and I had always intended on being on the pharmaceutical side, but it ended up where I got into the med-surg division and more of a supply chain role. As an operations supervisor, where I got to lead teams and work through logistics, right, when it came to getting medical supplies out through customers throughout the country, which was a fun experience. Learned a lot about leading people, but also learned a lot about, logistics and supply chain and what the need is, right, for customers out there, and why is it so important for you to kind of have things ironed out when you're navigating with patient care. So that was like a big thing. And then eventually I had somebody else reach out to me who was like, hey, we kind of want you back in the 340B space. Why don't you try the third-party administrator route? So I got to work for the third-party administrator space. And from there, it just kind of evolved into where it is today, where I also ended up working in specialty pharmacy. And I've been there ever since, doing contract administration and sales and helping folks get contracted with us under a payer, right, through vertical integration, which has ultimately opened up more savings from a perspective when it comes to a contract pharmacy lens. So that's where we are today.
Awesome. It seems like a great journey, and it seems like you have been through the 360 overview of all the pieces of the 340B program. So, Eric, before, let's start with cover entities. Like, when you look at the cover entities today, what feels like most different about the workload they are being asked to carry compared to like with even a few years ago?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I would have to say what's changed the most has been flexibility. Just because costs are rising in healthcare, right. But like the support for it has never really kept pace. Right. We see that there's almost like a shrinkage, right? And the opportunity that these CEs have the opportunity to provide savings, to expand their services in their communities. And you add on manufacturer restrictions, data requirements, new platforms. And so what used to be straightforward now requires like a lot more coordination and oversight. And so I think it's not just the work that's become just different in the workload. It's just more interconnected work, I think. And it makes alignment and decision making a lot more challenging for leaders and then those on the front lines as well.
Got it. So it's more about like they have to be more compliant. They need to have more visibility. They have to have all these data points to stay ahead of the game.
Yeah. And then, building that rapport to where it used to be you could reach out to your leadership and say, hey, X, Y, and Z is going on. Now it's just like A, B, C, D plus X, Y, and Z.
So, Eric, according to you, like many of these changes sound manageable on the paper. Where do they actually break down when teams try to like operationalize them?
Ownership, right? Because when you're in a covered entity, right? Normally, let's just put pharmacy, for example. I mean, you're strictly focusing on your business unit. A pharmacy, how do I manage the drugs, the inventory? Let's get them out the door right to the patient, right? That's been the traditional sense. And that was your ownership. But now, I think what makes it harder is ownership and work design is where things break down. So we all know what looks on paper is typically best case scenario. Yeah, right. But in reality, it's handoffs are much tighter coordination. And so I think now with more responsibility, it's like consolidated within the teams, and like I mentioned before, it's not just dispensing from the pharmacy. Now it's like managing the rebate model. Now just managing the upfront costs, and it's also supporting the compliance and the actual validation on the back end.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, things break down with challenges brought on about with ownership and work design. Eric, let's address the elephant in the room, right? MFP. That's the biggest talking point in this space. As MFP, Medicare maximum fair price becomes an operational reality, what are covered entities still underestimating, in your opinion?
It's a tough one. But I would have to say it's also a matter of perspective, right? Because covered entities are drinking out of a fire hose. And so it's hard for them to not be on the defensive. But I'd have to say the most underestimating thing is it's being looked at as just a pricing issue. Whereas it could be more of a strategic inflection, right? Like, so understanding what your opportunity cost is in this scenario. Because there's still margin, there's still opportunity that still exists, but I think it's understanding that window and that time frame that's available to you. So that could be shifting your priorities to understanding like, hey, I need to look at my payer mix for my patients, and then what's the margin and the drugs on that formulary, and how do I take advantage of that in this moment? And with this environment shifting so quickly, it's hard just not to react to MFP, but you kind of have to, right? Like, you have to take advantage of what's in front of you now. So
yeah, not being on defensive and taking advantage of what you have. That is a very good advice. And if so, let's say when a team is already stretched, right? That's how it is in this space right now. How should leaders think about prioritization? What deserves their attention? What is the first thing that they should be paying attention to?
I would probably start with risk, right? Risk is always like the first thing you got to think up about what's irreversible, right? What can I not come back from? And then you got to make sure you protect those areas first. And then from there, I would say just shift your focus to identifying where there's leakage, whether that be in a process or is it revenue, right? Just any inefficiencies that require a little better execution. And then lastly, I would say the question just becomes like, can you solve this problem long term, or can you turn it into a growth opportunity? And when I think you shift that lens, I think it can kind of provide more clarity.
Got it. So like, risks should be definitely the first thing that they need to see, and the leakage identification. And then definitely, Eric, as you mentioned, they should be focused on finding the opportunity versus solving the problem right now. So, Eric, according to you, like, what separates a team that is simply reacting to these changes or problems, once that is actually building a capability to find the opportunity and build a long-term like solution or like pipeline on that?
Yeah, I think it's hard not to be reactive, right, in this environment, and everyone's going to say, yeah, well, it's easy for you to say, right? But I think that is true. I think you are going to naturally react to things, but I think you can take it one or two ways, right? You can take on the pressure, right? As a reactive team, you're going to take on the pressure and kind of just be putting out fires. Right. We're going to be firefighters for what's coming on and what new things are being added in onto you. But I think other teams who maybe are building it out, they're becoming more disruptors in the sense of using that pressure as a way to say, hey, this is a signal to build a better process. And then from there, it's like they're taking the time to define roles clearly. They're creating ownership or designing new workflows to ultimately not just solve the same problem over and over again, but maybe solving it once and then taking it to the next step.
Got it. You mentioned that you have experience working with TPAs as well from third-party administrative point of view. So what should people think about tools right now? Like where the tech can generally remove the burden, and where do people expect too much from it?
Yeah, that's a good one. Technology, I mean, let's face it, right? There's a lot of partners out there, and everyone's got to figure out which one works best for them.
Right.
But I'd have to say, technology, there's strong value in the fact that it does the heavy lifting, right? And aggregating data, creating visibility, and supporting better decision making as you're communicating it out to multiple stakeholders. And I think we all get caught up, especially in the new keywords, right? Like AI. Oh, hey, that's the big thing. And it's going to create its own, right? It's senescent in its own way. But I think we always got to get back to the basics of understanding too, is that it's only as good as the processes behind it, right? So that famous saying of garbage in, garbage out. It's not that it's like garbage, but at the same time, your data is what it is. And the technology can only take what you give it to create that end product. So I think it's very important from an expectation standpoint to understand what you're giving the technology. And then you can kind of understand what those limitations are with the technology once it comes out. And then you have a better kind of like understanding and working relationship with your technology partner out there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is a very good line of thinking, that processes are at the heart of good technology, right? You need to have the processes right for technology to be able to make an impact. You want visibility with it. You want it to do heavy lifting, but at the very basic, if your processes are not right, technology is not going to be any real help. But let's say when there's calculators or models that are introduced to estimate impact or guide decisions. There's a lot of talk about AI maybe guiding decisions. What do leaders need to validate before they start trusting these things? That's, I think, a very important question.
Yeah, it is. And it goes back to kind of like what we've kind of talked about. The theme is understanding yourself as an organization, right? And what you're really putting out there and how you're utilizing it. Like models and calculators, like they're going to be great tools, right? We know that. And they're the best estimation, right, of what's actually going to happen or what is happening. But they're also only reliable as the inputs and the assumptions that are behind them. True, right? So what I think it's important to do is validate those assumptions, and then understanding the source that put it out there. And then I think you got to pressure test it. You've got peers in the industry who are going through the same thing that you are. And I think bouncing ideas and understanding the direction of your peers and you kind of puts you in a good spot to understand if you're heading in the right path with those calculators and models.
Yeah. Pressure test the assumptions over time and see how they perform under pressure, and that's when you can maybe start trusting, right? And if we talk about the leadership lens, what should the leaders be paying more attention to right now if they want their teams to, let's say, handle the next phase well? What are some of the things they should be paying attention to?
Yeah, that's a good one, and I love this question because it's kind of twofold. It's understanding that you're in the now, right? Taking advantage of now and the window that is available to you. But, I think we kind of gotta, I say this all the time, is get back to the basics, but it is true about the soft sides of change too. And it's managing your people and understanding your people. It's also about helping your people feel supported, helping them feel empowered so that they're engaged enough, right, to help you with these processes and the current workflow as they sit today, but also to build the future, right, of what's coming next with your new strategic lens. You got to take care of the people in order for strategy to work ultimately, or it's going to fall flat.
Got it. So Eric, like we have talked about like covered entities, like the topic was that the workload and then all the changes happening, whether it is MFP and then there were talk about rebate, but that went on the pause. But I think with all this, what I feel the education is also very important, that the covered entities needs to have like updates on all these new regulation. So how they can stay up to date about these new regulation and compliances that are being introduced in this domain?
Yeah, that's a good one. There's great resources out there, right? You have obviously the HRSA updates, but you've got Apexis and those wonderful websites out there. But you've also got podcasts like this one that's going on, right? Like
Right.
look at the resources that are out here. We have media at our fingertips that can help you understand what viewpoints and how people are interpreting the new rules, regulations, what lawsuits are going on. You know, there's 340B report. There's a lot of resources. And I know even some of the other technology and strategic partners out there, they're always putting stuff out there on their platforms. So number one, you've always got access. I think we have access today at our fingertips, which is so wonderful about the technology and the landscape that we live in. There were a couple years ago, I did the PEXA certification, right? Like to be A certified. I think that's a great way for folks to step in when you have time, right? In this little amount of time that a lot of entities do have. But
Right.
I think there's great ways for you to, model out your system, model out what language, not the language, but the understanding that you have today and how to expand upon that. But I would also lean on your peers too. Like I said, I think that's very helpful. There's a lot of people who are having multiple conversations and from a diverse lens, and I think it's good to touch base with as many folks as you can.
Yep. And Eric, you talk about AI as well, but you also emphasize that it's not just about the tech. You need to understand your input and what data points you have and what you are going to get out, and you need to have solid processes at the same time. So what kind of advice you will give to the cover entities who are struggling? Should they adopt any specific tech or AI, or they should focus on education or processes, according to you?
That's a great question. I think that it all goes back to what's your flavor, right? What works best for you? I don't think there's one solution or one size that fits all. Technology is a tool, as we all know, and can be utilized as such. I think sometimes folks feel like they have to have every aspect of technology, which almost burdens you down. Right. And then it becomes more of a bottleneck for how you efficiently create processes to be successful. So I think ultimately kind of streamlining it as much as possible, seeing what works for you and having those conversations internally to know what's actually useful and what's not. Again, it comes back to the whole garbage in, garbage out thing. AI is fun and flashy, and AI is great, but I know you can only give it so much too. So as it evolves and gets better, yes, we'll see over time what it can do and how much more heavy lifting it will take over time. But I think right now we got to handle it the same way as we have in this decade.
And then there is trust factor as well with the AI, the security, the privacy, the security guardrails, and especially in the healthcare and 340, people are really careful that they are not giving too much data to these LLMs. What do you think? Have you seen these kind of concerns from the leadership?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, no, because even in my own company, we've had to create our own internal, it seems like AI, right? Because they don't. You're right. For one, HIPAA, right? And we want to protect patient health information. So you don't want to just give this information out, right? And I think that's a big concern out there of who's holding the data, how it's being managed, and what it's being used for. And to your point with AI at your fingertips, you can type something in and it's going to populate who knows what, right? Depending on the question that's being asked. But yeah, I do see that. Like internally, I see that a lot of folks are gravitating to their own source of AI to kind of protect their interests and obviously protect how they're following the guidelines that have been set forth with the traditional laws in healthcare.
Well, thank you, Eric. So, Eric, before we wrap up, from your perspective, if you are advising a cover entity leader who knows change is coming but has limited bandwidth, where should you tell them to start?
I go back again to leveraging your network, right? And I know this is going to sound basic, but it's true. Your network is your net worth, right? You've got peers who are doing similar functions as you. They're experiencing the same type of litigation and potential changes out there in the industry. And I think they can provide real insight, right, on what's working and how to navigate some of this change. But I'd also have to say, keep in mind, we all have our own internal ecosystem. And what I mean by that is you do have employees that are on the front lines who are doing this too. So don't be afraid to encompass as many minds within your ecosystem as possible, right? Because that's going to give you the ultimate soundboard on how you're going to build out your strategy next. And that's where you get to get into that old school SWOT analysis, right? Of understanding your strengths and weaknesses, what's the threats, right? And what's the opportunities. And then from there, you get to build that focus plan. And then I'd say finally, and I can't stress this enough, don't try to do it alone. You've got plenty of partners out there, strategic, right? As far as, like you mentioned, TPAs, we have consultants, there are technology partners, but additionally legal advice and counsel. So I think pharmacy partners are another one as well, just to name a few, but ultimately they can help you move forward, right, more efficiently and quickly, depending on what your goals and where you're trying to be. So don't feel like you're alone in the fight.
Got it. Really solid advice. And from this, I was just thinking, there's a 340B collision that happens. Do you think those kind of networking events can really help the people who are just starting in this domain?
Absolutely. And maybe I'm biased because I like to go around and talk to as many people as possible and see everyone and get to know. So I can be kind of the mayor, so to speak, right? We'll just say that wink, wink. But it's fun to get to these events. It's fun to learn from other people's perspectives. And it's good to just have that inner human connection, right? Everyone's going through the joint struggle. And I think it's important once you have that connectivity, you all can get along well and understand how you might be able to affect change on your own level. And like I said, and it's always good to go to different places. I mean, San Diego in February, I don't know who can beat that.
And DC in the summer.
And DC in the summer. So I don't know. Some folks like DC in the summer, some don't. But hey, it's still a good time to go and see folks and spend some time in a different area of the country, for sure.
Well, great. And Eric, the people who are listening this podcast and who wanted to connect with you or learn more about you, what is the best way to reach out to you?
Well, find me on LinkedIn. Feel free. Eric Mitchell at LinkedIn, Eric Mitchell MBA, right? You'll see me on LinkedIn. But if you ever just want to shoot me a message via email, I'm at ericsterling6@gmail.com. Feel free. I have an open door policy for folks. I'm just always interested to learn everyone's unique perspective, and I would love to connect with you.
Well, there you have it. Eric, thank you for joining us. This was thoughtful and grounded. Exactly the kind of conversation 340B Pulse is meant to bring forward. At North Arc, we focus on helping covered entities strengthen visibility, improve ESP and beacon readiness, reduce operational burden, enhance audit defensibility, all without disrupting existing TPAs or workflows. If you'd like to learn more, visit northarchealth.com.
Well, this has been 340B Pulse, powered by North Arc. We shall see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.